This video is now in session, and today we're going to talk about the California gubernatorial recall election. So this is the third governor's election that's scheduled to happen in 2021, with the other two being Virginia and New Jersey, which we have covered in previous videos. For this video, with the California gubernatorial recall election, it originally was not supposed to happen because California elects its governors every midterm cycle, so every 4 years, and it was supposed to be the next time Gavin Newsom, the incumbent governor, was up for re-election would be in 2022. That said, California has a law stating that if there are enough signatures, around 2 million signatures of people who want to recall the incumbent governor, then a recall election would be held, and that's exactly what happened. Just a couple of weeks ago, the recall movement had reached the amount of votes, or the amount of people needed to initiate a recall election, with around 2.5 million individuals calling for Gavin Newsom's recall. Now, that may seem like a huge number, 2.5 million. That's more than some states, but California, if we look at the 2020 election, 2.5 million votes is way less than the amount of votes that Donald Trump got in California in 2020. He got 6 million votes, which, by the way, is greater than any other state, literally, for both Republicans and Democrats. They do not have these margins in any other state. So it's pretty easy to initiate a recall against someone like Gavin Newsom, especially if you're a Republican, because you have the votes in order to do so. So now we're seeing a recall election. But what does this mean for California, and why did this recall happen in the first place? This recall election was based on Gavin Newsom's handling of the COVID pandemic during the summer and during the winter, where both of those time periods went really badly for California. If we look at the COVID cases, you can see that it started spiking over in December and as well as in January. And this is when Gavin Newsom really ramped up the restrictions that came from COVID-19, and that led to a lot of businesses shutting down and a lot of unhappy constituents. So many of them, both Republicans and Democrats, signed on to the recall question. And not only that, but there's this infamous photo of Gavin Newsom at the French Laundry, which is a very it used to be one of the best restaurants in the world, but Gavin Newsom was at a dinner floundering his own COVID protocols, where he was breaking his own rules that he set up for the rest of Californians, and that obviously did not resonate with Californians, and that led to even more people signing on to the recall petition, and thus we have this election. Now, we have some precedents to kind of back the recall candidates in this election, which is in 2003, there was another recall election that was being held in California to recall the Democrat Gray Davis, who was governor at that time. Gray Davis was credited for bringing California into an economic decline, and as a result, enough people signed on to the recall for this to happen. Now, because of that recall election, ultimately Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's a Republican, won the state. Democrats were not able to win. You can see that they lost by 31.5 percentage points, which is very low. And that's how Republicans were able to win. And this was based on the economy at the time. Now, fast forward to 2021, this is also based on the economy, except this election will work way differently from the 2003 election. Democrats are starting to learn from their mistakes, but not completely, which is that in 2003, there were Democrats who openly campaigned against Gray Davis, because how the recall election works is there are two questions that constituents have to answer. First, should the incumbent governor be recalled? And then second, if he is recalled, which candidate do you want to replace him? And you cannot choose him or her. You cannot choose the same person who's currently the governor of California. So because of that little asterisk in that second question there, Democrats really screwed up in 2003 because they were pretty indecisive as to whether they should keep Gray Davis and who should they nominate next, and who should they put up to the governor's position. A lot of Democrats thought that Gray Davis should still be the governor. Other Democrats, though, thought that they should be running against Gray Davis so that they can succeed and have a better chance at winning instead of Gray Davis, allowing Democrats to keep the incumbency. Obviously, because of those two opposing opinions, Democrats really Democrats really were not prepared for this election in any way. Obviously, they wanted the vote on recall to be a no, but there was not enough votes for that to happen. You can see that the yes vote won by 11 percentage points. And then from here, because no Democrat really stood out in this race, and because there were so many Democrats, they all split the vote, and that led Republicans to have good margins, to have Tom McClintock win by 13.4 percentage points, and then Arnold Schwarzenegger to win by 48.6 percentage points. And thus, that's how we had a Republican governor in California for 2 terms, or around 2 terms. Now, fast forward to 2021, the difference between that election and this election is that Democrats are much more unified in what kind of strategy they want to pursue. So for this election, Democrats are essentially not going to run any candidates to replace Newsom. They're going to campaign on the idea that Newsom did not do anything wrong and that Newsom is safe in California, and thus you should keep him as governor. So there are not really that many Democrats who declared themselves. There are 2 Democrats obviously right here, but ultimately they're not. Democrats don't want them to gain much media attention, and they're mainly focusing on Gavin Newsom. Now, that may be the best strategy because it's the simplest strategy, but in a idealistic world, the best strategy for Democrats would be to have its constituents say no to the recall question, and then to vote for a Democrat in the second question. But obviously, that can create some confusion, and it could put up Gavin Newsom against the Democrat. So that's why Democrats are not doing that. Now, on the Republican side, for the in terms of who they are running, because we've talked about a lot about who Democrats are running and who Democrats are not running. So for Republicans, John Cox, Doug Oust, and as well as Caitlyn Jenner, all of these 3 candidates seem to be the front runners in this race. You can see here, or I mean, Doug Oust, not really, actually, I take that back, but I'd say John Cox is the front runner in this race, and Caitlyn Jenner is not the front runner, but she's the most well known out of all the candidates, primarily because she I mean, if you just look at the gossip industry in California, then she's very well known. Now, for Poland suggests that even though Caitlyn Jenner is trying to be like Arnold Schwarzenegger and being like a Hollywood LA type of person to run for office, ultimately she only has 5 percentage points in comparison to John Cox, who has 9 percentage points. John Cox, by the way, was the 2018 candidate against Gavin Newsom, and he lost by 38.1 percentage points. So if he's the front runner and if he's poised to take over Gavin Newsom, he would have to win over that many votes, which is a lot of votes to win over, and it's becoming harder for Republicans to see the idea and to entertain the idea that Gavin Newsom will actually be recalled. But that isn't stopping them from heavily campaigning against Gavin Newsom. Obviously, this is a race that they want Gavin Newsom to be out in, because Gavin Newsom is one of those national Democratic profiles in current day politics. So that's why you see John Cox campaign with a bear, I believe. He campaigned with a bear, and that backfired on him. But ultimately, they're trying to bring more attention to this race, and what they're trying to do is nationalize this race. And if you've watched our other videos, particularly our Senate videos, you'll know that nationalizing is not necessarily the best way for parties to win races. For a California governor election, the governor's races are solely pertinent to the state, where the state elects their governor, and the governor manages the state. So trying to nationalize the election will probably probably turn off a lot of California voters who are crucial for the Republican Party. Yet that's exactly what the Republican Party is doing. They're trying to point more attention to the California race, especially using the Fox News in order to promote this race. And that could ultimately end up something like what Democrats did in Iowa and in Maine in the 2020 election, which is nationalize Senate races that are really supposed to be decided by the constituents in those states, and as a result, have them lose votes and have them backfire in their strategy. So that's pretty much how the recall election is at this current state. In terms of Gavin Newsom, polls suggest that there will be a no on a recall. The only time where it trended towards a yes was on a Republican pollster. But you can see on pretty much every other pollster, even Republican pollsters, they say it's a no on recall. And that's because California has rebounded in COVID cases. As you can see here, California is doing the best state out of any state in the U.S. at this current moment. In addition, Gavin Newsom announced that there was a $76 billion surplus from California, and thus he's going to vie for increased stimulus checks, so more like tax rebates, to give back to Californians. And some of these decisions can be politically motivated for this election, but obviously there's not much. What else could we expect from politicians like Gavin Newsom? They're going to do what's favorable for them, and they're going to try to get as many votes as possible, and they'll do whatever they need to do in order to get that. So that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. This video is now adjourned, and I'll see you in the next one.